What if, in a single day, you lost everything? Your wealth, your family, your health, and even your closest friends turned against you. Would you still trust God? This is not fiction. This is the true account of a man whose faith was tested to the very edge of human endurance. His name was Job, and his story is one of the most profound demonstrations of loyalty to God ever recorded in the scriptures. Today we uncover the trials, the accusations, and the divine encounter that changed everything. In the land of Uz lived a man unlike any other in his time. His name was Job, and the scriptures describe him as blameless and upright, a man who feared God and turned away from evil. His life was a testimony of moral integrity in an age when many walked in rebellion against the Creator. Job's blessings were visible for all to see. Vast herds of oxen, donkeys, sheep, camels, and a household filled with many servants. He was considered the greatest man among all the people of the East. Yet Job's wealth was not his true treasure. His devotion to God ran deeper than material abundance. Each morning before the sun rose, Job would offer burnt offerings for every one of his children. He feared that in their hearts they might have sinned or spoken against God. This was not an occasional ritual. It was a pattern of life, a daily commitment to intercede for his family. His home was filled with joy, his children often feasting together in one another's houses. Laughter and plenty seemed to follow him, and all who knew him respected his wisdom and character. But unseen to Job, events were already set in motion that would shake his life to its foundations. For the measure of a man's faith is not revealed in times of abundance, but in the crucible of loss. And soon, Job's devotion would be tested in ways he could never have imagined. Far beyond the earth, in the unseen realm, the heavenly court gathered before the throne of God. Among the sons of God who came to present themselves was one who did not come to worship, the adversary, Satan. His presence was not hidden from the Almighty, for nothing in heaven or on earth escapes his sight. The Lord spoke to him, "From where have you come?" And Satan answered, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." It was the voice of one who prowls, searching for those he may accuse. Then God himself pointed to his servant Job. "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him, blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." It was the highest commendation a man could receive, spoken by the Creator himself. But Satan's reply dripped with suspicion and contempt. "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You bless the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." The challenge was issued, the accusation clear. Satan claimed Job's devotion was nothing more than selfish loyalty purchased by blessing. If the blessings were stripped away, Satan argued, Job's faith would collapse. And the Lord answered, "Very well, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." The court was dismissed, and the adversary departed. Unseen to Job, a storm was gathering. Before the day would end, his life would be reduced to ashes, and his faith would face its first trial. It was an ordinary day in the land of Uz, but the messengers began to arrive one after another, each bearing news more devastating than the last. The first came breathless and trembling. "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys grazing nearby," he said. "When the Sabeans attacked and carried them off, they put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." Before his words had fully settled in Job's mind, a second messenger appeared. "The fire of God fell from the heavens and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." Even as his voice faded, a third rushed in. "The Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and carried them off. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." But the final blow came from the fourth messenger, his face pale with dread. Your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert. It struck the four corners of the house and it collapsed on them, and they are dead. I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. In a single day, the greatest man of the East was reduced to nothing. His wealth was gone, his servants slain, and all his children taken in a moment. Yet Job did not rage against heaven. He tore his robe, shaved his head, and fell to the ground, not in despair, but in worship. And he said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. The adversary had struck hard, but Job's faith still stood. Time passed, but the eyes of heaven remained fixed on the man of Uz. Though stripped of wealth and family, Job's lips had not cursed his Creator. His worship still rose like incense, a testimony that silenced the first accusation. Once again, the heavenly court assembled before the throne of God, and once again, among them came the adversary. The Lord spoke, "From where have you come?" And Satan answered as before, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." The Almighty asked, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him, blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. And still he maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without cause." But the adversary was not finished. His voice coiled with venom. "Skin for skin," he declared. "A man will give all he has for his own life, but stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face." It was a second challenge, more personal, more severe. Satan claimed that Job's loyalty would shatter if his health were touched. The Lord replied, "Very well, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life." And so the adversary departed once again, authorized to press the test further. If the first trial had stripped Job of what he owned, this next would strip him of his very strength. Unaware of the conversation in the heavens, Job was about to face a torment no riches, no friends, and no human wisdom could relieve, the kind of suffering that gnaws at both body and spirit. The dawn broke over Uz, but for Job, light brought no comfort. Without warning, an unseen hand struck his body with a plague of painful sores, from the crown of his head to the soles of his feet. Every movement sent waves of agony through him. His once strong frame, respected by men and envied by kings, now trembled under the weight of unending pain. Job sat among the ashes, scraping himself with a shard of broken pottery. The ash heap, a place for discarded things, became his refuge. Flies hovered, his skin cracked, and infection threatened every wound. This was no passing illness. It was a relentless assault meant to break his spirit. Then came the voice of one closest to him, the companion who had shared his life's joys and sorrows. His wife, her own grief twisted into bitterness, said, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." Her words cut deeper than the sores, a temptation to surrender the very faith that had defined him. But Job's reply was firm, even in weakness. "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" The days blurred together. Neighbors who once honored him now kept their distance. Children mocked him in the streets. His name, once a symbol of blessing, became a whisper of pity. Yet in all this, Job refused to curse the Lord. The adversary's second blow had fallen with fury, but the man of Uz still clung to the one he could not understand, yet could not abandon. His faith was battered, but it had not broken. Soon, the silence around him would be broken, not by comfort, but by voices that claimed to speak wisdom, yet would only deepen his pain. News of Job's suffering traveled far beyond the borders of Uz. 3 men who had long been counted among his friends heard of his calamity and set out to comfort him. They were Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. These were not strangers. They were men of standing, men who had once sat at Job's table, shared in his counsel, and respected his wisdom. But when they came within sight of him, they scarcely recognized the man they had known. His body was gaunt, his skin marred by sores, and his posture slumped in the ashes. The man who had once been the greatest of the East now looked like one forsaken and broken beyond repair. They lifted their voices and wept aloud. In a gesture of grief, they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they joined him on the ground, sitting beside him in silence. For 7 days and 7 nights they did not speak a single word. The weight of his suffering was so great that even words seemed powerless. But silence cannot last forever. In their hearts, questions began to stir. Questions about why such calamity had fallen on a man known for his righteousness. And though they had come to comfort, they would soon become accusers. For now, the ashes remained still, the air heavy with unspoken grief. Job's friends believed they were witnesses to a tragedy, but in the courts of heaven, they were about to become instruments in a trial of words. And Job, weary in body and soul, would soon break his silence with a cry from the depths of human despair. On the 7th day, the silence shattered. Job lifted his head, his eyes hollow and his voice trembling like dry leaves in the wind. He did not curse God, but he cursed the day of his own birth. "Let the day perish on which I was born," he cried, "and the night that said, a man-child is conceived. Let that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, nor light shine upon it. Let it be a day shrouded in blackness, forgotten by the calendar of men." The anguish poured out like floodwaters. His words were not calm prayers, but raw lamentations, torn from the deepest chambers of his suffering. He longed for rest in the grave, where kings and slaves lie side by side, far from the noise of trouble. "Why," he groaned, "is light given to those in misery, and life to the bitter of soul? Why is it given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in?" This was no quiet morning. It was the voice of a man who had lost everything: wealth, family, health, and hope, yet still felt the weight of breath in his lungs as a burden too heavy to bear. And as his voice echoed through the ashes, the friends who sat around him listened, but their hearts began to harden. They believed they knew the reason for his pain, and soon their comfort would turn into confrontation. The first to break the silence was Eliphaz the Temanite, an elder with lines of wisdom etched deep into his face. His voice was steady, almost gentle, but carried the weight of accusation. "Job," he began, "you have instructed many, strengthened feeble hands, and upheld those who stumbled. But now that trouble comes to you. You are discouraged. It touches you and you are dismayed. Consider this. Who, being innocent, has ever perished? Where have the upright been destroyed? As I have observed, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same." His words carried an ancient logic, a belief as old as the dust under their feet. Suffering is the fruit of sin. Then Eliphaz spoke of a vision in the night when deep sleep falls on men. A whisper came to him, a ghostly breath that made the hair on his flesh stand up. It asked, "Can a mortal be more righteous than God? Can a man be more pure than his maker?" To Eliphaz, the answer was clear. Job must have erred. His suffering was not random. It was the consequence of guilt. And so what was meant to be comfort came instead as a subtle wound. For in Job's ashes, the weight of false judgment cut deeper than the boils on his skin. Job lifted his head, his eyes burning from sleepless nights. His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the raw strain of a man pleading for understanding. "If only my anguish could be weighed," he began, "and all my misery placed on the scales, it would surely outweigh the sand of the seas." He admitted his words were wild, born from pain too heavy to bear. He had not sinned against God. Yet God's arrows seemed lodged in him, their poison draining his spirit. Turning to Eliphaz, he asked, "Do I have the strength of stone? Is my flesh bronze? Do I have any power to help myself now that success has been driven from me?" He reminded his friend that loyalty in times of despair is sacred and accused them of failing him. A despairing man should have the devotion of his friends, even though he forsakes the fear of the Almighty. For Job, Eliphaz's words were not medicine, but salt in an open wound. He had not asked for silver nor rescue, only for compassion. And as he spoke, it became clear. Job was not only wrestling with the silence of God, but with the betrayal of those he once called brothers. Job's voice trembled, but his faith still flickered like a small lamp in the darkness. Despite all the words of Eliphaz, despite the weight of his loss, Job knew in his heart that God was not absent. His suffering was deep, yet his soul still reached upward. He declared that his trust was not in riches, not in health, not in the approval of men, but in the God who gave him life. In the silence after his reply, the weight of heaven seemed to hang over him. The fields outside his home lay barren. The wind still carried the smell of dust. But within Job's heart there was a strange, unexplainable resolve. He did not yet understand the reason for his suffering. He did not know that a heavenly test was unfolding beyond what human eyes could see. But he chose to endure, even in the face of unanswered questions. This moment was not the end of Job's story. It was the proving ground of his faith. His wounds were still raw, his grief was still sharp, yet there was a quiet truth settling in his soul, that God's plans are higher than human thoughts, and his purposes are deeper than human sight. And here lies the heart of Job's testimony, that faith is not proven when the path is easy, but when every step feels heavy and hope seems far away. Job teaches us that it is possible to worship even in the ashes, to cling to God's name even when the blessings have been stripped away. Friend, if you are walking through your own season of loss, remember this: Job's God is your God too. The one who saw Job's tears sees yours. The one who sustained him through the darkest nights will not abandon you in yours. Your story is not over, and your pain is not wasted. Hold on to him, even when you don't understand, because on the other side of the storm, there is a sunrise you cannot yet imagine. Trust him, for he is faithful.